Welcome to New Hope Lutheran Church and Pastor Charlie's Toolbox. So today I'm looking at different pieces of scrap lumber I've had kicking around, and I'm noticing once again that there are different types of wood, and these different types of wood, they all have their special properties. And while it might be common to have a preference for working with one kind of wood over another, the preference is also dependent on what kind of project you're working on. What do you want your project to do? How strong does it have to be? What color would you like it? It would be kind of ridiculous if I were to do all my woodworking with only one kind of wood. There's a variety of woods, and that's a good thing because, you take pine, for example. Pine it's a nice enough color. It's easy to work with because it's a soft wood, easy to cut, easy to sand, but it's not excessively strong, not like oak here. And oak, well, you finish it off like this piece of flooring here, and it's got a beautiful color to it, and it's very strong, tough, and durable. But it's hard to work with because it is so tough. It doesn't cut that easy. It doesn't sand really easily. But you want strength, you want oak. Now, you could also use, for some interior trim stuff, mahogany. A very fine grained, it's kind of a softer wood. And mahogany has in the past been used for trimming out the insides of your house. So this piece was a door stop at one time. The door comes against it and it stops the door, which is why it's called the door stop. But that's mahogany. It looks pretty good when it's varnished, but it's not as expensive as something like oak. And then, of course, if you're building a home, you got to talk about spruce. Now, spruce isn't extremely beautiful. It's a soft wood, so it's a little easier to work with, but it's really plentiful and it's cheap. So this garage here, for instance, is framed in spruce. All the framework, stuff you normally wouldn't see, probably made out of spruce. Like I said, it's cheaper, it's a little easier accessible because there's so much of it. Of course, there are other kinds of woods as well, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. They all have their purposes where you might want to use them. And different things can be done with wood. For instance, you can take, well, they've invented something called plywood, which is made by stripping logs, thin veneer off logs, and then they re-glue it with the grain going one way on one layer and the other way on another layer, and it's glued together, and then the next one is done that way and that way. So what you get with plywood is something that doesn't have to be that thick, but it's still quite strong. This piece, for example, it won't bend, even though it's just a little piece. And this one, which is thinner yet, I can feel a little flex in it, but not much. It's very strong, this plywood. And it's often has been used for floors, like underneath your other flooring, or on roofs or walls. Something else you can do with wood, of course, is you can shape it into things like a baseball bat. So here we have a nice hardwood baseball bat. And you want hardwood because when you go swinging at a ball, you want something that's not going to break. If you made this out of pine, it would probably only last so long and it would break in pieces. So because there are so many different kinds of wood, there's no rule that says you have to use only one kind of wood. I mean, that would be dumb. Each type of wood is acceptable for its various purposes, as they all have their strengths and weaknesses. There's no one kind of wood that's better than all the rest. Now, this all relates to our lesson today from Acts 11, 1 to 18, where we find the Apostle Peter, he had a vision. And in this vision, he saw God accepting all people, not just one kind of people, as some of the Christians back then thought. You see, all people are part of God's creation, and each one has something to offer, just like the different kinds of woods do. And what this teaches us then is that it is our duty to also see people as God sees people, not as various kinds where some are viewed as unequal in some way, but as who they are as individuals and as equals with all their strengths and weaknesses. You know, if God accepts us Gentiles as equal to the original people of Israel, why do we not do the same for others? This is God's plan. And this sense of equality is God's message for us today.